Alright, hello, welcome to the stream. I'm just gonna do some technical stuff in the beginning just to share the links. So bear with me just for a few minutes. If you're watching the recording, just skip like 5 minutes or so. Just sharing the link with people. Just a few more minutes, then we should be good to go. I'm gonna go through some of the tasks that we had today, recapping a bit of those arrays, a bit of functions. Just a moment. I'm gonna close Teams for myself today, so that my computer has a bit more power. It's an older computer, so it's not that performant. So if you have questions, please ask them in the YouTube today. Few more minutes. Okay, hopefully my computer is a bit better now. Just a couple of more checks just to see that everything is working as it should. Yes. So, welcome to another Thursday. This week we've been going through some arrays, functions, scopes, iterating, using loops, using for each, using while. So let's start with opening up the materials first. It seems that I want the first lesson, so I'm gonna open up the correct ones. So lesson 2, let's recap a bit what we've done so far. So we've been going through arrays. So you remember array is a list of values. Then looping, iterating, pretty much the same thing. Scopes, built-in functions, and functions that we define ourselves. I'm gonna go through arrays, loops, iteration, scoping, and the functions quickly because we've already been practicing those. And then I'm gonna jump into the exercises myself, and I'm gonna do the same exercises that you've been working on. Just so you can have a look at how these exercises could be done. So first I'm gonna create a new file called hello.js. If I'm able to, let's see, good. My laptop is running super slow today, once again. So let's see if I can get Emmet running. No, I have to do it the old-fashioned way. Script. Let's close the script. And src pointing to hello.js. Sorry, I have one more thing I need to do here. Okay, so now we have hello.js and we have linked the JavaScript into this page. And if I hover this, you will see some tooltips. Script element allows authors to include dynamic script and data blocks in their documents. Element does not represent content for the user. So script tag includes some JavaScript files and will also execute the content of this file. So first, let's create again a variable. Let's call it a car or type of car or name of a car, and let's call it Toyota. And now I'm gonna create a list called cars, and first I'm gonna initialize it as empty. As you see, it's an empty array. This will have some methods and it will have a length. The length of this is 0. If I console log it, we can see that the cars is a list. It has some methods in this prototype and it has length 0. So I'm gonna add the name of a car into it as the first value. And after this, I'm just gonna start pushing values to it. So cars.push. Let's add a Nissan to it. And let's add something else as well. Let's add Tesla. And I want to have a fancy car in this collection, so let's push a fancy car into this collection as well. So now you see I have pushed 3 cars into this list, but here you only see 1 car. But if I open this up, you will actually see a bit more. That's because the Chrome DevTools renders the first line here as representing the list, the cars array at the time as it was called in the console log on line 5. And after I open this, there has happened some things between the console log and me clicking this. So the new values have been added here, and I can see those. If I copy and paste the console log, we will be able to see the new values here. And we can also push the list into itself. That is possible, but that will, I'm gonna copy paste this as well so we can see it. This will cause some sort of weird behavior. So here we have some cars, we have 4 cars, and I am pushing the list into itself. So now what we have is a recursion. So this is recursively adding itself into itself, which is not something we want, but which is something we can do. At this moment, I cannot come up with any use case for this, but maybe there is a use case for a thing like this. But in our case, let's try to avoid pushing the list into itself. But if I would have another list, let's call it other cars, and let's put Toyota there a couple of times, then I can push the other cars list into this list. Now you will be able to see that we have first our 4 cars, and then we have our 2 new cars. You would most likely want to merge these two, integrate them to each other. So instead of having a list with cars and then the last value being a list included in this list, we can do this. It's possible to do that. We can concat this list of values into another list. If I would remember how to do it. So we can check combines 2 or more arrays. This method returns a new array without modifying any existing arrays. Okay, good. So we know that this will return a new one, it will not modify. So as you see, nothing new happened here. So let's call it const combined array. And if I console log combined list of cars, we should now have a list here that has all of our cars, even from the second list as well. So just to verify, I'm gonna add some strings here. Car, cool car. So we will be able to see that we have car and cool car here as well. And the original list was not modified. And now I'm gonna iterate through the new cars list. So first I'm gonna iterate it through with for loop. Let I equal 0. This is the initialization part. For loop has 4 parts. first initialization, then condition, then we have the step, and finally we have the for loop body. So this is the initialization, condition I is less than combined array dot length, and the step is I++ in this case, as we want to increment it only by 1. So initialization, let I equal 0, condition I less than combined array dot length, and step is I++. And notice that here we have to have the semicolon on the first two ones, on the initialization and the condition, and then on the step we don't need it. You can write for loops in different ways as well, depending on the case that you want to implement. What I am teaching is the most common for loop, or one of the most common for loops, which is just iterating a list from 0 until the length of an array. We could also iterate from 0 to some defined length, such as 100, but in this case I want to iterate through a list, and I want to do it with the for loop. And now what I really want to do, I want to show you all of my cars individually. So car is cars. So this is the list, and we can access specific index from specific item of an array. We can call it with the index. The way we call it with the index is we define an array call here. It kind of looks like an array call or array definition. It is not, but it's familiar. And then we give the current iteration the value of this I on any iteration. And as I save, we will see that we have Toyota, Nissan, Tesla, fancy car, and then lots of undefined. This is because I made a mistake. These cars here should be the combined array, because we are looping through all the items in the combined array, but I am looking at the cars. So let me just change the cars to be combined array. So now we will also have the concatenated values. Then you can see now we have all these cars, and we have Toyota here twice. And I'm gonna change this console log message a bit. Car at index, and then I'm gonna give it the index value, which is I. And now we will see car at index 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth until index 7. Notice how this list has 8 values, 8 cars on it, but the index of the last car is 7. This is because in arrays, index starts at 0 and index ends at array length minus 1. Okay. I'm now gonna continue forward with looping with a different way. So I'm gonna loop with a for each loop. So we have the native for each loop method. So in this loop, in the for each loop, I will not make the same mistake that I made earlier. just because I will get the keyword or the variable car in the loop itself. So combined array, this is the list that I want to iterate, and for each of these values in this list, for each calls the callback function one time for each element in the array. Performs the specified action for each element in an array. The specified action is the callback function. And I'm gonna define a fat arrow function here. We have two ways of defining them functions in this class, and this one is the fat arrow. So these brackets here define that now I am defining a function. And I get, as a callback value, I get the item in this combined array. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. Console log car, and now I have the variable car. And as I save, you will see the same cars here as well. Excellent. And let's go through one more time for of loop. For const car of cars, console log car. So each time you see I am going from a bit more complicated towards a more simpler solution, doing the same thing anyways. For each, it gives the function, the callback function, three parameters, arguments, the value at that iteration, the index of that iteration, and the whole array itself. So we are interested in the value and the index. And here I'm just gonna put the index here as well, so we will see the indexes here. For the cars, for the for of loop, it's not as simple. At least I don't know. We could check the for of documentation. Just gonna open that. And let's see if it's possible to get the index using the for of without defining I as 0 and then incrementing it. Might be that it's not possible. Let's see. Yes, so it seems that for of is used only to get the specific item of a list, not the index of that item. That's okay. So the way I do this now is same as it would be in the while loop or in the for loops. Different parts. It's first defining the I variable to be something, and after we have done everything we want to do, I will increment the I to be one bigger than it was before. And now as I save, we will see the same values here. But again, I am looping at the cars, so there's only 4 items. The reason why I'm doing the I++ at the end is because we want the console log to have the current value, not the next value. If I would move this in the beginning, we would see that our list now, which is here, starting from here, you can see the line numbers as well. Now this would start from 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, that's not what we want. So we want 0, 1, and 2, and 3. Okay. A bit about scopes. Scope is defined by these curly braces. So this is a scope, this is a different scope, this is the scope of the for loop, and everything outside of these curly brackets, curly braces, is the global scope. So these values have been defined in the global scope, but the for loop has its own local scope. So they are a bit different scopes, and you will be able to see bit different things in these scopes and redefine variables, for example. If I would define a variable, const my variable equals 1 here, I am able to call it or access it here inside this for loop, my variable. We see it here, and we actually see it here many times because I am inside a for loop. But now if I try to call this same variable outside of the for loop, you will see I get an error. My variable is not defined. Even though on line 32 I am calling it, and in line 27 I am defining the variable, but because I have defined my variable inside a local scope for the for loop, I cannot access it outside of that scope. But if I would define it with let, you would see the same thing. Not possible. But if I would define it with let outside of the local scope, so if I would define the variable in the global scope, I define this in global scope, and here I assign value in local scope. Now I am able to access it in the global scope. So you see no red line here anymore, no errors, and my variable outside of the loop. Number 1 doesn't tell us much, but if I would change number 1 to be I, which is the variable, you would see that it is the last value of the loop. So the loop runs 8 times until the variable has value 7. That was scopes with some arrays. Next I'm gonna move into functions. So a function is some sort of code that can be called over and over again. It is some sort of code snippet that you can define and then call it wherever you want. Usually you have to first define the function before you call it, similar to the variables. You also have to follow some naming convention and same rules as defining variables. So you cannot add spaces, you cannot use emojis, you cannot use numbers in the beginning of the name. But you can define the name as you wish. There are a couple of different ways of defining functions. In this class we will define functions using the function keyword or by using the fat arrow syntax. Today I'm gonna define functions using the function keyword, and later on let's try out fat arrow as well. But here on the for each you already saw the fat arrow. If I would refactor this to use the function keyword, all I would need to do is remove a bit of code and it works again. Okay, great. I'm gonna comment out all of this code now, so we can start working on our functions. So, console log functions. I'm gonna create my own function here. I'm gonna call it by name of function of this stream. Usually you would not add the word function into your function name because you already know that the function is a function, so you don't need to repeat. So let's rename this to something cool. This stream is cool, and we could return some value. Let's say that this stream is not cool. So you define a function with the keyword function, you give it some name, you put the braces here, then you put the curly brackets, and this is the function scope, the function body, and I can give some parameters here. Let's add some parameters, cool beans, and stream is live. And let's do something with these. So I'm just gonna console log cool beans, and my return statement will be stream is live. So now I'm gonna console log this function call or function. So I have to call the function. So first I'm gonna do the console log. So console log itself is a function. It is a method provided by the JavaScript environment. And for this console log function I give two properties, two arguments. First one is let's call the function, and now I'm gonna do the function call. So this stream is cool, and now I can give some parameters to this. So this line is gonna get a bit long, so I'm gonna move this into a variable. Cool equals this stream is cool. So the return value of this function will be the end value of the function call, and that will be assigned into this variable called cool. And now as for cool beans, I'm gonna just write beans, and stream is live, it is true, we are live, so I'm just gonna type the boolean true, and as I save it says cool beans beans. Let's call the function true, and I'm gonna change this line a bit. Is the stream cool? My code says yes, And once I stop streaming, I will change this to be false, and my function now says that it is not cool. And let's change this to cool beans dude, for example. Cool beans dude, is this string cool, false, because I defined false here. If I would pass some other value to this, such as banana, we would see the value banana here. In JavaScript we cannot define types. We know the types of values, we know the types of a variable, we know the type of the return statement of a function, but we cannot force the type to be something. Therefore, I can change my Boolean value to be a string value. That's because JavaScript is both dynamically typed and loosely typed. So when you're defining functions, use names that convey some meaning. So cool beans might not convey that much meaning, but stream is live will convey a meaning. Stream is live, the is part here tells me at least that it is either on or off. It is either true or false. It cannot be anything else but than true or false. There's just no other options. Boolean is also always either true or false. And if I say stream is live, then it is either live or it is not live. Therefore, true or false. And cool beans variable is bad, so I'm gonna call it name. That's a bit better. So now we have this function called this stream is cool. I give someone's name. This time it's the name of a dude. So my code will say cool beans dude. And then the console log on 68th line will say is the stream cool banana. That doesn't mean much because that's not answer to a question, is this stream cool, unless you have some weird way of answering yes or no questions. Okay, let's move forward. I'm gonna create one function with the fat arrow type. So first we give some name, my fat arrow function. And again, as I call this function, first I type in the name of the function. So this is not yet a function call. I am just telling the console log to print out the content of the function. Here you see that it print out the content of this function. This was not a function call, so I have not called this function yet. But as soon as I put braces here, brackets, it will call this function. So now you see hello undefined. But here I see hello world, which is here. If I would want this function to return something, I would add the return statement. But let's keep it as such for now. So function will always return something. Even if you don't define a return statement, it will return something. In this case, as I have not defined any return statement, the function will return undefined. Remember, undefined is something that has not been defined, therefore undefined. It is both data type and the content. Undefined is not empty, it's not false, it's not zero, it's just undefined. If I type here undefined, you will see it in pink and it returns undefined. Type of undefined is the string undefined. So you remember string, it always has a length, but undefined, no such thing. A list will always have a length, but undefined does not. And if I would want to see the type of a list or an array, type of, it's an object. That's a bit peculiar. That's because everything in JavaScript is an object, basically. So what I do is I check array by using the built-in method from array namespace. The built-in method is array. And here we see it is indeed an array. We will get to objects later on, so let's skip that for now. So if you would build a function that checks if something is an array, you cannot use the type of, you have to use array is array. So let's build that function here. Function check that value is array. And let's give some sort of value to it. And we will give it a return statement. Return array is array. Array. So we have array many times here. So we could also call this an arg, as the language itself is calling it, or I'm gonna type here value, because we get some sort of value, and let's check the value of this value. Console log is this array, and let's call check that value is array, and let's say true. For it's not an array, okay. Let's copy paste. Let's keep on finding values that are arrays. Is number 1 an array? No. Is string 1 an array? No, that's good. But is empty array an array? Yes. Excellent. Just gonna copy paste this one. Cars again, and let's put some cars into it, and let's check that if the value of cars again is an array or not. Yes, it is an array. Even when it has content, it is an array. If we would do the same thing using type of, return type of value, just gonna comment that out. So you would see boolean, number, string, object, object. Well, then you could think like, okay, maybe I could check that when it's an object, then it would be an array. So here you see true and true, because these are arrays. But if I'm jumping a bit forward on the materials, if I pass an object, this is also an object. It will also say true. Well, an object is not an array. Instead, we will call it using the array is array. And here you see object is not an array. I'm gonna Google, can I use is array? And again, you see this caniuse.com. It has an excellent support tables for all the resources you need. And here you can see that not all the browsers support is array, but as you see, more than enough of browsers, 96% of the browsers support this. If you care about iOS 4, or if you care about Internet Explorer 6, 7 or 8, or some older Firefox, Chrome or Opera or all of those, then you're in trouble. Then you need to do some kind of different kind of check to see if an array is an array. On this course you can use that to check if an array is an array. And most likely you will not be needing to do any polyfills or any hacks to get around old browsers. And another thing here is these three links: current aligned, usage relative, so you see Chrome being the biggest one, and all the browsers are green, that's good, and date relatively, so you see again everything is green, that's good. So you would need to go back in time until 2011 to see first browser that does not support it. And you would have to go until 2010 to get no browser supporting it. And IE at 2002, of course, does not support it. So caniuse.com, really useful resource for checking values if some browser supports some behavior. I can create this as a fat arrow as well. Let's do that. So const check that value is an array. I'm gonna just name it 2 and use the fat arrow. Here I'm gonna console log. I'm gonna console log these and these. Just gonna copy this here and move this here. And copy paste this, check that value is array 2 to here. And console log these away as well, because we don't want to see those at this point. So now you see that my new fat arrow function also returns true when the given list is an array, and if I give it a string of cars again, for example, it is false. Fat arrow function has this nice behavior that when you only have one statement, so this is one statement, one line of code. If this is your only content, you can remove the return statement and these brackets as well. And now it's a bit simpler, and as I save, it will work again. So that is nice. Okay. Just gonna see if there's any comments or any questions at this point. Doesn't seem to have any questions at this point. That's okay. So let's move forward. I'm gonna jump over the built-in functions. We've gone through these many times already. Array push, console log, array sort, and all of that. I want to show array sort anyways, because that is an important function. Important because in many job interviews you will be asked to sort a list of numbers, and it's not as simple as one would think. Because the built-in sort will sort in ASCII order and not in the actual numeric order. So when someone asks you to sort a list, let's say that a list is numbers, I call it my numbers, and let's say that I have numbers such as 1, 2, 35, 23, let's say 11, 12, 20, and 19. Now, if I console log this, you will be able to see that nothing has, of course, changed yet. We haven't sorted it yet. If I sort this, my numbers dot sort, and I copy paste this line, so you will see that the JavaScript language will sort the values for us now. But if you look if you look at the values closely, you will notice that they are not actually in a good order. 1, 11, 12, 19, 2, 20, 23, 35. If I would add number 3 here, for example, and maybe I'll add number 4 as well, you will see 1, 11, 12, 19, 2, 20, 23, 3, 35, 4. So you see some sort of pattern here. It's not sorted in mathematical terms, but it's sorted in ASCII terms. So if I hover this sort function, you will see documentation about this function. So when an interviewer asks you to sort some values in JavaScript, don't stop when you have written .sort, because that is not the sorting. So instead, give the sort function a callback function. We call a callback function, this is called callback function because we give the sorting function some sort of function that it will call. So it will make a call back into this function that we provide. So the simplest way is to use the fat arrow syntax again, and we call these items A and B, and you will also see that in the documentation here, in the examples, they also use A and B. You can call them first value, second value, or whatever you want to call them, because when you define functions, you can define the names as well. But common practice is to use A and B in this case. I've been talking a lot about functions, variable names and function names that convey meaning. Therefore, they are not one letter long, one letter. Instead, always use some sort of variable name that conveys meaning. First item, second item, or so forth. But in this case, the industry practice is to use A and B. So every rule has their exceptions. So here we follow the convention to use A and B, and here we will subtract B from A. And now, as I copy paste this line and save it, we should be able to see these values in order. As you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. You might be asking, well, what about if I want it to be in the other direction? Well, just change A to be B and B to be A, and you should be good to go. Or what you can also do is call my numbers dot reverse. And now if I console log this line again, you should be able to see that first, after the proper sorting, the values are going from the smallest to highest, and when I use the reverse, I can get the highest value. But now, as I have sorted this list from smallest to highest, let's say I want the minimum value of this list. That is simple now. Console log minimum value is my numbers, and the first item of this list is now the smallest value. You see, 1 is smallest value. If I would add -1 here, you would see that the smallest value is -1. And again, after the reverse, if I want to get the largest number, console log maximum value is again the first value. Here. So 35 is the highest value. What if here, after this sort, you want to get the highest number? Okay, I'm just gonna copy paste the maximum value because that works for us. Let's just put that there and it's good to go. And now we look at the console log and we see maximum value is -1. What is this? Well, that didn't work out. So what we need to do, we need to get the last item of this list, and that is easy to get as well. What we need to do is we need to get the index of the last value. So the index of the last value, you remember, is the length of the list -1. So now we see maximum value is 35. If I would put just the my numbers length as the maximum value, well, no luck there. Because this length is now going over the indexes. So this will have 11 items. 11 items, the length is 11, but you see the length, the last item, the index is 10. And again, as you see, the reverse did in place sorting, so it modified the original list. So now that I opened this, the sorting is all wrong, but that's because in line 125 we have the reverse. But anyways, length is 11, but there is no index 11. So we need to do length minus 1, and we get the maximum value. And same here as well. The minimum value is my numbers at the latest index, which is index 10. So now you see minimum value is minus 1. Just gonna see if there's any questions on the chat. Doesn't seem to have any questions. Okay. That's okay. Just gonna see if there's any questions in any other chats. Okay. So that was sorting and a bit of reversing. Sorting will most likely become an interview question. So remember to add the callback function and then some functionality in that callback. You can Google how to sort numbers in JavaScript, because it's not as simple as it would appear. And you will get lots of blog posts, YouTube videos, and all of that. Okay, so let's jump into our tasks that we had this week. So the first one is to create an application that creates 2 lottery rows for next weekend's lottery. Hopefully, we can create numbers that are the correct ones, but most likely we will just create some numbers that are between 1 and 40. So let's start cracking. So first we want to, in this task, I want to create each of these kind of applications in their own functions. So first function, next week's lottery rows. And inside this function, I will start implementing my functionality. So the first value, if we look at this document, the specification, it says creates 2 lottery rows. So how do we create 2 lottery rows? We define some sort of list, lottery rows. And let's define it as an empty list. And I will return this list immediately. It's a good idea to immediately write the return statement as well, because then you don't forget to add it. Similarly, as you immediately after writing the opening bracket, you also write the closing bracket, or your editor does that. It's a good idea to always finish or always put the return statement at when you start writing this code. And now, what we want to have 2 rows. So let's make a for loop for 2. We could do this manually by 2 times, but let's use the for loop that we have been practicing. So for let I equal 0, and as long as I is less than 2, we will keep on doing this logic. And here we need to have some sort of list again to hold the 7 numbers between 1 and 40. Okay, so let's have const numbers, and that is a list. And we need to do this 7 times now. So again, for let I be less than 0, I is less than 7, and let's increment I. And even though they are the same variable, they should work. If they don't, we'll fix them later. If you would use the legacy var syntax, then this would not work. But let's try it out, and if it doesn't work, we'll come back to later and fix it. And now what we want to do is generate a random number, const random number is math. So in math we have this random number generator, and here you see returns pseudo-random number between 0 and 1. Between 0 and 1. Well, that's not what we want. So what we want to multiply this by 40, because 40 is now the biggest number that we want. And let's push it to the list. Numbers.push random number. And now we have all the numbers pushed into this list 7 times. So let's push the list to the lottery rows number. So lottery rows push numbers. And each time this loop iterates, it recreates everything inside here. So even if earlier loop created this numbers list, we need to recreate it for the current loop so we can start populating values into it. And the previous values on that list does not exist on the new loop. So in this for loop we have two loops, loop 1 and loop 2, and they are on their own scopes, in their own spaces. They do not see each other. So as we define the numbers list inside scope 1, scope 2 has no knowledge of this numbers list or this numbers array. Instead, scope 2 or for loop 2 will only see the values that have been defined inside that. And of course it will see the parent scopes. So the function scope is one scope, second scope is this for loop, and third scope is this for loop here. So altogether we have 4 scopes here. We have for loop scope, function scope, and the global scope. And now we have some lottery numbers, so let's just check if this works. Console log next week winning lottery numbers, and then let's call it next week's lottery rows, or lottery numbers would be better, but let's see, let's actually rename it to next week's lottery numbers. And now hopefully we have everything working here. Good. So even though we defined I twice, it still works. But as you see here, we have a bit of an issue. This is not actually a lottery number. What we want to have is an actual whole number, not a decimal number. So let's round this to the closest integer number, and let's round it down with floor. So I have wrapped this math random function call and then this multiplier statement inside this math floor call, and now if I open this, it should look a bit better. So we have math random here, we have a multi-dimensional array for storing values, and we have not yet checked any duplicates, and we have not sorted any numbers. That's okay. So next week's winning lottery numbers are 3 and 3, 34, 7, 23, 15, 6 and 22. This is not a valid lottery number generator because number 3 is here twice. In task 3, I think it was, no, sorry, task 4, we will get rid of those duplicate numbers. Okay. So I'm gonna now create a function that gets the smallest value inside an array, and I'm gonna reuse the values returned by this function. So function smallest value, and for this we get some sort of list of values. And first let's define the smallest value to be the first item on this list. So smallest is a list of values and the first one. It might not be the smallest one. It might not even be close to the smallest one. It is just some value on that list. We cannot define this to be 0 or -1 or something. We have to define this to be some value within this list. Otherwise we might get value that is not in the list at all. Number 0 might not be on that list. So we will have an issue, we will have a bug in our code. Instead, what we do, we'll get some value of that list. And now I will just console log this, console log smallest value in list, and I'm gonna define here const list is next with lottery numbers, and I will use a bit weird syntax now, because I know that this function returns an array. I can therefore get the first item on that array. And my editor will also tell me that function next week lottery numbers will return number list. So this is an array of arrays. Array of arrays, which is of value number. So the array of arrays will contain numbers. So using this syntax, I will get the first item on the list, on the array that the return statement will give us. So smallest value in list is smallest value, and then we pass the list to this function. So when I say I pass a list to this function, I mean when I do the function call, the argument of that function, or the parameter of that function, is the list. So I pass the list into this function. And now, as I look, my function tells me that the smallest value in list 24, 9, 0, 20, 35, 23, 3 is 24. Well, it's not the smallest one. And secondly, we have another issue here as well. Number 0 does not is not in the specification of task 1. It says between 1 and 40. So let's first fix this issue. So number 0 should be number 1. So I can easily fix that by changing math.floor to seal. So let's round it up instead of rounding down. Let's round it up. And now as I save, I should not see number 0 here anymore. But yes, so now the smallest value on this list is 28. Well, there's 12 that is already smaller as the next one. So let's implement our functionality. First, what I will do is create a for loop once again. Let I equal 0, I is less than list of values dot length, and I++. So I iterate through all of these values in this list. And here I have just 3 lines of code. First, if smallest value is greater than the current value, so list of values and the current one, this signifies as the current value. If that is smallest is greater than that, let's redefine smallest to equal list of values at this index. Assignment to constant variable. So you see I made this mistake of defining smallest to be a constant variable. So let's define it with let. So now we have let smallest and we can edit it. So now we will see that the smallest value in this list is 14. Okay, that's good. And we had a specification that do not use math_min function. I'm gonna use it anyways, but I'm not gonna use it in the function itself. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna validate my own function. Validate my function, and I'm gonna call math.min with my smallest value with my list, and make sure that they are equal with each other. So here we see that my function and the built-in function return the same value over and over and over again. So this 3 dot, we haven't covered this yet. It means that spread this list over this function. Spread this variable list over this function. And here on some documentations you will also see the 3 dots being used. Because list is an array and math_min does not take arrays, it takes some values. So it will take parameter 1, parameter 2. So I will write them here. Math_min with a list 1 and 2. You see, not a number, but if I remove the list and I add more values here, you see that now it works. So math_min does not take a list. You cannot give a list to math_min. What you do is you give parameters, and if you want to give it a list, you need to spread that list over the function. The 3 dots signify that this is a spreading operation and we spread something over something. Good, excellent. So now we have function that finds the smallest value, and we also have our lottery generator. Next, what we want to do, I want to ask the user to that we generate as many rows as we want, and I can just edit this current one. Let's say number of rows, and let's put it here instead of the 2. Now what I need to do is I need to change. If I save this, my code stops working because I have not passed number 2 or passed any value to this function call. So let's pass it number 2 as the default, so that still works. And now I will create another function, ask user, generate rows based on user action, for example. And let's call this function lottery rows and here I will just return I will first ask how many rows, const how many, prompt how many rows. Again, this how many variable is not named well, but let's keep it for now, and let's by default ask 2 rows, and let's change this to be answer, because that's the answer of the user. Const how many is a number of the user, so we typecast user's answer into a string. Because the prompt will return a string, as you see, so we need to typecast that into a number. And now I can return the lottery numbers. Return next week's lottery numbers and how many. And now as I save, I will say here that return me 10 lottery numbers, 10 rows of numbers. And here we have now 10 rows of numbers. Next one I want to make sure that we don't have the same number twice in one row. It could be on different rows, but let's keep it out of the same row. And here we have some specifications of how we have to do this. We have to check with array includes for the duplicate numbers, and we have to use while loop to do this. The tasks, if you were doing them, each of these should be in their own file. Task 1, task 2, task 3 and 4. But I'm just gonna modify my original for this stream. So here what I want to do is let's look at the specifications first. So make sure no same number is on the loop at no duplicates. So let's see. While true, so our condition is always true. We need to move this random number generation inside of this while loop. With let, so we can edit it. So random number is math seal. And now if the numbers list does not exist, does not include this random number, let's break out of the loop. And then we can push this random number into this random this numbers list. And hopefully we should not be able to see any duplicates. So let's change this 2 to be 100. And let's go through some of these numbers and see if there's any numbers that repeat. It seems that our code is working, so we have 11 and 11 here, but they are on different rows, so that's good. Just gonna see if there's any questions or anything anywhere. Doesn't seem to have any questions. That's okay. And now let's do one more thing. We have checked with array includes that no duplicates, and we have used while loop. So while true, as long as this is true, do something. And here in this if, so if no number exists in the list already, break this while loop and push it to the numbers list. And now I'm just gonna, as a bonus, I'm gonna sort this because sorting is usually a good idea, at least in this kind of thing. It might add some performance issues, but for this task we don't really care. So let's say we want 200 rows, and all of these rows should now be sorted from the smallest number to the biggest number. And each of the rows should have 7 values. 7 values. And no duplicate values in this list. If I reload again, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna decrease the number 40 to be, let's say, number 10. So now our space will be a bit smaller, so the while loop will take a bit more time to do. But for this small of numbers, it should work still. But let's say I change this to be 7. Now we are getting into some interesting things. So now it should go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Still working. What about number 6? And now I think my laptop will melt. So now we have created an infinite loop. Because we are trying to get the duplicate values, but the namespace, the amount of numbers is less than the amount of numbers we want to add to the loop, add to the list. Therefore, we have infinite loop and nothing will actually work. So let's change this to be 60. I need to reopen this tab. And now it should work. A bit slowly, but it should work. And here we see now these lottery numbers, and now the numbers are a bit bigger than on the assignment. That's okay, I'm gonna move it back to 40, and we create 2 new rows. So here we had couple of examples. First was how to do these exercises or these tasks, and second one was a bit of refactoring. So refactoring means that when you change some code to work in a different way, or if you change the code to work better without modifying the behavior. And we created 3 functions for these 4 tasks, and we reused the functions that we created. So first we created this function that creates lottery numbers for us. We use that as a basis, for example, to find the smallest value on any given list. And we use it as the base of getting those values from user's actions. So we ask user how many rows do you want? The user replies 2, and we will get 2 rows of values. Okay, let's see if there's any questions at this point. or any comments or anything. Seems to be a quiet night, that's okay. Okay, cool. I don't think I have anything more for today to show you. Tomorrow we will have a class and we'll continue from lesson 3. So we'll recap some of these lesson 2 stuff, and we will go through some sample solutions for these tasks, and then continue with lesson 3. Lesson 3 will have some document object model things. Document object model means the model of the website. So we will do some basic stuff of getting values from the website. We will do some event handling and some more functions. We'll look at a bit of the HTML and a bit of different ways of doing similar things. And we'll have some more fun exercises. Only 3 exercises, but they are fun. At least the last one is fun. Excellent. So I will be stopping the stream now. I will hold out for one or 2 minutes if there's any final questions, but I don't think there's any questions at the moment. Then I'll be streaming again next week. Okay, I don't think there's any questions today. That's fine. Gonna check Teams quickly to see if there's any questions on Teams. Hopefully I have not missed any questions or comments. It appears that we have no questions today, so that's fine. I'm gonna stop the stream and we'll see